Kansas State continues to cook in the transfer portal.
You are Locked On Kansas State, your daily podcast on the Kansas State Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Christian Rao, and thank you so much for making Locked On Kansas State your first listen every single day. Welcome back to my everydayers. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. New customers can win $200 in bonus bets if you bet $5, guaranteed win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Well, we got another reaction show, another commit, and another just cooking it up for Chris Klieman and the rest of the Kansas State Wildcats recruiting staff, because we got another one. Number 11 in the commits, Brandon Sneh from Wagner, the offensive lineman, commits to Kansas State on Wednesday evening. Very exciting for this one. This is a big ad for the offensive line. Could be a starting tackle for Kansas State in 2025. Has the opportunity to do so, and I think he's going to have every chance to make it happen heading into spring and heading into 2025. Once we get to Dublin, he could be one of our starting tackles. Would not put it past it if that's the case. He's got plenty to back it up, and that's the case as well. Yes, he did play FCS football, was at Wagner, but in his sophomore season at Wagner, he was phenomenal. He did not allow a single sack in his tackle spot. Coming out of the tackle, did not allow a single sack. So great protection, and that's something we're absolutely going to need coming into 2025. There's a super high standard when it comes to this offensive line, and it sounds like he fits the bill and will be able to just roll right in with this group next season. Now, the biggest question will be, can he make that jump from FCS to the Big 12? That's a huge jump. There's no doubt about that. He's skipping the G5 level, if you will, and he's going to the Big 12. Can he do that and still have the same type of success? Obviously, only time will tell. There's no doubt about that. But I think he has the opportunity to do so. He was a 3-star prospect coming out of college. He was the 65th ranked player in his position. And I think this is a really big ad. I think this is a really good piece for Chris Klieman to work on and get for his 11th player in the transfer portal. They're absolutely cooking when it comes to adding players in the portal. You already talk about, and you've heard me mention it multiple times over the last few weeks, that they already had great momentum heading into the transfer portal because of the great recruiting class they had heading into it on National Signing Day. They brought in so many good freshmen, including the top-ranked freshman in the program's history. Then I thought the momentum was slowing down a little bit because you didn't get this immediate impact from the transfer portal. It took quite some time, but now when we're finally starting to get it rolling a little bit, and even though we're into later windows, this is still a great ad. He's not the number one offensive tackle coming out of the transfer portal. That's definitely not the case, but even in the late window, this is an exciting piece for Kansas State to add. We talk about the departures. There are so many departures from Kansas State, not as many as we expected, to be completely honest, and that's the Avery Johnson effect coming into play, but there were still quite a few, either from the NFL draft declaring, such as DJ Giddens, Jacob Parrish, etc., or from players leaving elsewhere. And in this case, talking about the offensive line, veteran tackle Carter Willis, he was a big loss. Whether you liked this player or not, he was the starting tackle last year for Kansas State. He leaves the program to go to Washington, and that was a piece that needed to be filled. Brandon Sneh can fill that role. I think he absolutely can. And again, I think he's going to have the opportunity to battle for that position. So overall, good piece. He is the second offensive lineman in the transfer portal to be added for Kansas State. Amos Tilele from USC is also one. And I don't think they're done yet. They just had a visit today. We'll talk about that quite here in just a minute. But overall, I think Connor Riley is doing a really good job with adding some offensive linemen to once again make sure that they are bringing the best 105 to Dublin for week 0. We're about at 125 players on this roster right now. They're going to have to cut 20, and it's probably going to be a little more than that when it's all said and done but they're going to make sure that those 105 players are the absolute best. This guy had a lot of visits. He had a lot of offers, and he stuck with Kansas State. That means a lot. And that just rolls right back into that narrative, folks, saying that the momentum is right here with Kansas State, especially with the offensive line. Why would you not want to play for Kansas State if you're an offensive lineman and you see the track record of some of these players who have entered the NFL draft, have success in the NFL? I'm looking at you, Cooper Beebe, Dallas Cowboys, right? There's lots of great reasons why you'd want to come to Kansas State if you're an offensive lineman. You have some great offensive weapons around you with Avery Johnson, with Dylan Edwards. The wide receiver group should be better in 2025. We're going to talk about that on Friday's episode. No, excuse me, tomorrow's episode on Thursday. But I still think this is a good addition for Kansas State. Again, I mentioned how many offers he had. I think he had over 20 offers on the table. 20 schools were at least involved, according to On3. So I'm assuming that all meant offers. And a lot of things that stuck out were California Golden Bears, Colorado Buffaloes, and Kansas State were his final three. And he decided to go with Kansas State. So not only did we beat out other teams like Cal on the West Coast, we beat out a Big 12 school with Deion Sanders in Colorado. That's a big deal. That's a big deal if you're Kansas State. You take that win, you take that victory, and you move forward. And again, I don't think they're done yet. I think there's still plenty to be excited about. If you're Kansas State, if you're paying attention to the transfer portal, there's been a couple of visits already, and I don't think they're done adding more. Yesterday, I said I think it's going to be closer to 15 when it's all said and done instead of 10. That means I'm only 2 away from that being true if we're going to round up in those numbers. And I do think that we have a couple left on the docket to commit. I think one's on the defensive side, and I think there might be one or possibly two still on the offensive side when it's all said and done. But there was a visit that just happened on Wednesday in the same position group, the offensive line. And just because Brandon Sneh, the Wagner offensive tackle, committed today, I don't think that changes the fact of us being in the potential running for another one. We'll talk about it right here next on Locked On Kansas State. Did Rocket Money help you find subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? Well, that definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy for them to track them down. And it's just like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel unwanted subscriptions, monitor your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Perfect timing to begin 2025. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of over 500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 per year using all of its app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions today and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. And welcome on back to Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. Again, I'm your host, Christian Rao. You can find me on Twitter at Christian S. Rao. If you want to talk Kansas State, you want to talk college football, college basketball, anything you name it, let's hook up. Let's have a good conversation. And while you're here, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button as well on the YouTube channel. We are looking to get to 500 subscribers. We're almost there, folks. You guys are just doing a fantastic job helping build this community here. And I'm really excited to be a part of it and join this journey. But we just talked about Brandon Sneh joining the Kansas State Wildcats, a huge ad for this offensive line. And I do think it's going to be really exciting to watch that. That means now in the race to 105, and that's going to be a big narrative that we talk about over the next few days, few weeks, probably next few months, to be honest, as we get all the way up into spring ball, is how do we get down to 105? Right now we're at 125 if you add Sneh into the conversation. And of those 125, I believe 23 is the number for the offensive lineman. And I do think when it's all said and done, it might be 24 because there are still one other player on the eyes of Kansas State that could potentially be added as a commit that just had a visit on Wednesday. And that is Kansas State and former Coastal Carolina offensive lineman Mason Bowers. Now, he was a redshirt senior this past year, 6'4", 295 out of High Point, North Carolina, went to High Point Central High School. Again, started at Coastal Carolina, played from 2020 to 2023. He didn't see a lot of game action according to his roster page on Kennesaw State. According to his time at Coastal Carolina, did not see a lot of game action in 2023. But in 2022, he played 4 games, seeing most of the time on special teams like field goals, PATs, things like that. But he also did play some on the offensive line. He was a 3-star recruit at defensive tackle by 24/7 and ESPN, and played both ways in high school. So he made the transition from defensive tackle as what they thought he was going to be in when he was recruited. He moved over to the offensive side and has been there ever since. So it looks like he's got one more year of eligibility left because of all the COVID rules, super senior rules, and all that good things. And he has made a visit to Manhattan on Wednesday. He was on social media. He put the little tag mark, the location tag, saying that he was with Kansas State. Hopefully that means that he is going to make his decision very soon. He did discuss in an interview the other day, we talked about it on the show yesterday, but he was looking to make his decision at the end of the week. So hopefully that means that Kansas State is his final visit, and that means good things for the Wildcats if that's the case. If that is the case, and we get another offensive lineman in the books, then that's a great feeling. You know, even if it is meaning that we have 24 offensive linemen heading into spring, that's probably going to be one of the positions that take probably some of the biggest cuts. I was trying to think about who you would have to cut or what number you'd want to bring into your 105. And I'm guessing anywhere from the range of 18 to 20 from the offensive lineman when it's all said and done. Now, I think that's where I'm at. I don't think you can get any lower. Like, is 16 too low? I think 16 is too low. So I'm maybe sitting around the 18 mark, but could go as high as 20. So if that's the case, you got to cut at least 4. Right now, at least 3 where we're at right now. But if you add a guy like Bowers, you got to move on from 4. Now, this number right now does include Hadley Panzer. It does include Taylor Potier. They are still waiting on waivers. Potentially, they could be back. So at this moment, that number does include them. If those waivers come back and they're declined, well, you already have an answer for 2 of your numbers that you have to remove, right? But I think 18 is a good number to bring in for your offensive lineman when you're trying to get to 105. I'm sure Coach Kleiman and the rest of the coaching staff have a good idea of what number of each position they want to bring in. But I have a feeling offensive line is going to be a really tough one to figure out. Unfortunately, you're dealt with a lot of injuries on the offensive line during a regular season. It's a very tough position to play. It is a grueling position to play. You're in contact every single play, unlike some of these other position groups that you're playing at. So you are probably going to be more towards that high side. I would not be shocked if it's not 18 and it's more towards the 20. So that's why I do think 16 is too low. But Mason Bowers could be that final piece on the offensive line that Connor Riley goes after to make it to 24 on the offensive line roster spots heading into spring for another player to battle. He would have 1 year of eligibility left, and a player that has played at multiple spots in the group of 5 level, trying to make his step up into the Big 12. That could always mean good things. Hopefully that's the case. He played in 11 games for Kennesaw State last year, and I was trying to pull up PFF while we were talking discussion, but it's having a really hard time pulling it up, so I don't have his PFF stats right now. But overall, it'd be nice to see Mason Bowers and Brandon Sneh pop in to this conversation. Bringing in 3 offensive linemen in this transfer portal, to me, I think would be huge. We had some discussions this offseason so far and during the season about how this offensive line didn't live up to some of the expectations that we as fans put on that position group. And it's crazy because it still won awards at the end of the year as one of the best offensive lines in all of college football. But a lot of us were not happy with some of the results that we saw from this offensive line. So hopefully that's the case that this coaching staff also sees, showing that although it was seen as one of the best offensive lines in college football, there's still plenty to be improved and plenty to go after in the transfer portal. So you already got 2 in Amos Talele and with Brandon Sneh, and now potentially Mason Bowers. We'll find out probably towards the end of the week, and hopefully we have another reaction episode like we do right now, talking about another big offensive lineman in Brandon Sneh. I want to end this show with a fun note. And we talked about Jacob Parrish. He's going to the Senior Bowl. We talked about him yesterday. But I want to talk about what a certain NFL scout talked about and why you should be paying attention to Jacob Parrish in the Senior Bowl and potentially beyond heading towards the NFL draft. We'll talk about that all right here on Locked On Kansas State. And welcome back to Locked On Kansas State. Hey, let's wrap up this episode with some fun just info, right? We talked about on yesterday's show how Jacob Parrish, defensive back for Kansas State, has declared for the NFL draft. We also talked about how he is named to the Senior Bowl. One of the underclassmen for the first time, the Senior Bowl. It's going to be happening on February 1st in Mobile, Alabama. It's going to be on NFL Network. You can check that out. He's going to be a part of it. Looks like he'll be the only player for Kansas State involved. But one of the interesting things that came out on Wednesday was ESPN NFL draft analyst and insider, he's a scout, Matt Miller, put out, and you can find him on Twitter at NFL Draft Scout, so shout out to him, put out something about Parrish. And he said, quote, Kansas State cornerback Jacob Parrish was announced as a Senior Bowl player, and I'm a fan. He's undersized at 5'10", 183 pounds, but he plays tough at the line of scrimmage and limits targets with his closing speed. He's probably a slot in the pros. He splits his time at Kansas State, but I wouldn't be surprised if he left Mobile with a top 75 grade. Now, that's really impressive. You got to love that he's putting him in perspective, saying that hopefully Parrish can finish the NFL draft coming in April as a potential third-round pick, at least. Maybe a third or high fourth-round pick when it's all said and done. You always have people, players in the front office, or people in the front office, I should say, reaching for players that they like outside of that top 75. But a top 75 grade for a cornerback in Jacob Parrish, who at some points had his issues, even in this last season, is great. People are seeing the intangibles that he has and the tangibles and all the great aspects he has. I think his game will translate well into the NFL. So this is not a complete shock to me. It's just nice to see that people outside of the program, outside of Kansas State, outside of Manhattan, are starting to see that for Jacob Parrish. I actually really like some of the comments that people were putting on Matt Miller's too. Somebody put that Parrish reminds him very Asante Samuel Jr.-like frame, which I agree as well. Another good NFL defensive back. Another comment said, think Trent McDuffie, tackles well and covers like a dog. Couldn't agree more. I thought he did a really good job covering this season. There's only a few times you have to question that, but that can always come better when you take that next step and you go to even higher, defensive coaches when you get to the NFL. He's an absolute ball knower. There's no doubt about that when it comes to Jacob Parrish. So shout out to Matt Miller for giving a little bit of Kansas State love, talking about Jacob Parrish, who will be at the Senior Bowl on February 1st. Really excited about the NFL draft, by the way. We're going to have multiple people in the draft and might not have a first rounder like we did last year. Might not be the case, but having players like Jacob Parrish, having players like DJ Giddens, having even Dante Cephas, the potential of him being drafted. There's a lot of fun things to pay attention to, and I might have to maybe book myself a hotel room in Green Bay and stand out there and watch some of that draft coverage. I've always wanted to go to the NFL draft, and I know it'd be absolutely insane with all the people there. I feel the older self in me is talking about, like, it'd be hard to find a hotel, parking would suck, you wouldn't be able to get any restaurants, but I think it'd still be a cool experience. So maybe I'll have to do that this year, or maybe I wait a year or two until Avery Johnson is in the draft. What do you think? You think I should do that? Let me know in the comment description below. But overall, Jacob Parrish getting some love, and I'm excited to watch him in the Senior Bowl at the beginning of next month. Hey, that's going to wrap it up here for Locked On Kansas State today. We'll be back here tomorrow with a crossover episode with Locked On Houston Cougs. We're going to talk about the basketball game coming up on Saturday. I didn't hold back. I didn't keep the Kansas State bias. I let them know exactly how I felt about this team. And unfortunately, it's not always good. It's not always the great things, but after those last couple losses, it doesn't get any easier for us. And even though a ranked opponent's coming into Manhattan, there's a lot of things to be concerned about, although we do well against ranked opponents at home. But we talked about that on that show, so I hope you guys enjoy that. It'll be coming up on Thursday morning. But until then, we'll see you back here. Please subscribe to the video, and we'll see you back here next time on Locked On Kansas State.